Hello, hello, my children. Today I'm going to teach you the poem My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Now, yesterday I was teaching you Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. Now, Robert Browning is also a Victorian poet, like Arnold and Tennyson. But if you compare it with Arnold, you'll find that Robert Browning is totally different from Arnold. Now, Matthew Arnold was regarded as a melancholic poet and as a pessimist poet, but Robert Browning was an optimistic poet. Optimistic poet means who's always looking forward to good things in life, who is never pessimistic, and he never, falls into a state of depression, or who never welcomes the changes in life. In fact, Robert Browning always wanted to welcome the changes of the time, and he's always looking forward for the betterment of life and for the betterment of things in life. And his poems are very important in the sense because he is, in a way, trying to revolutionize the cultural background of that particular times, and the literary background also of that particular age in which he lived. Because you see, Victorian age, even though it was supposed to be a progressive age, but yet, the morals and the traditional values that were attached to the lives of the females, or to the, you can say, the lives of the wives after their marriage, was very, very precarious and very perilous, in fact, for a woman to stay in a house and be happily married. So, My Last Duchess is a dramatic monologue which was written in 1842. And in this particular poem, the poet talks about the conditions of the wives. And this is related to the to Duchess Ferrera, who was married to Duke Ferrera, and he was married. She was married at the age of 14, and she was dead by 16. So these, suspicious conditions, as how after 2 years she was dead, that was an inspiration for Robert Browning to write this particular poem, and which dives into the mind of Duke Ferrera, who never allowed anybody to control the feelings of his wife, not only the feelings, but any of the actions of his wife. And in fact, let me tell you about Robert, an interesting fact about Robert Browning also. His parents, wanted him to be a medico, and he was sent to London to study medical science. But he refrained from doing that, and he came back, and he was very much interested in writing poems. And later on, he had married Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and the father of Elizabeth never wished for the marriage between Robert Browning and Elizabeth. But because, that monopoly which the male people have over, or the dominance that the male dominated society has over the females, that could be seen even in the father of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, because he never wanted his children to do things which he never liked himself to be done. Like if he was in opposition for this particular marriage of between Elizabeth Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, he after this man, but of course she rebelled. Elizabeth rebelled, and she finally did marry Robert Browning. But after the marriage, his father did not see the face of Elizabeth Barrett Browning till his death also. So you can imagine, I mean, how ruthless and how autocratic and how, you can say, obstinate these male people were as far as their relationship with the female world was considered. Now, this is a dramatic monologue. And as you all know, in a dramatic monologue, there is one speaker. Dramatic, matlab, whatever the story or whatever the scene or whatever the incident that the poet is relating, it is in a form of a drama. That is something which can be acted out and said, something which can be viewed by the reader as an action, or of an event of the particular incident or an event that is taking place in front of him. And monologue, mono is one speaker, and log is, of course, the speech. So it is the one man speech. But here, sometimes the monologue is by the person himself to himself, as if the poet is speaking to himself only. But at other times, it is also true that there is a silent listener also attached to that particular person who is speaking, or he is listening to the speech of that particular person who is reciting that particular tale or that particular incident or that particular story. So here in this poem, My Last Duchess, the very first this poem was written, as I told you, in 1842, and he says in the beginning only, he says, "That's my last duchess," painted on the wall. Now, see the very first line, that's, and that's is a demonstrative pronoun, and that is clearly indicating. It is clearly indicating to that particular person who is a silent listener. He says that that's my malapit. He is demonstrating and pointing out to that particular painting that is there on the wall. Probably the listener who is there with the Duke, he is passing to through the art gallery of with paintings and sculptures that are there in that gallery, and he is struck by one particular painting which is hidden by a curtain, and that particular painting is the painting of the wife of the Duke. But how proudly, and the very statement, "That's my last touches," also states the pride that the Duke has in pointing out to the figure that is painting on the wall, and which is none other than his own wife, because he says, "That's my last duchess." Now, you must note the point, the word last. Last denotes that previous wife, and after this previous wife, probably he has an intention of getting married. Probably the Duke is talking to the servant of the courtier who has come with the proposal for a second marriage with the Duke, and he's pointing out to him about the last duchess, that is my previous wife, that is there on the wall, looking as if she was alive. Now, that picture, that portrait is so alive, so vivacious, and so lively. It seems that as if the woman is not painted, but as if the woman is standing there, coming out all alive in its real form. I call that piece a wonder. So he is in this particular line. The Duke is showing his admiration for that particular painting. For he says, "I call it a wonder because it's awesome, and it is a wonderful, very artistic, very beautiful." Now Frau Pandol's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. And Frau Pandol's, and he's giving an applause to the painter also, because Frau Pandol, probably who was the painter who painted this portrait, he says he did a wonderful job in painting that particular piece of the picture of my wife. He says that Fra Pandol's hands worked, but he was very busy the whole day long in drawing out the portrait of that figure of that particular person. And there she stands. That is how alive she is, as if she can almost come out of the picture and stand in front of you. Will it please you sit and look at her? And now he's just asking the listener, the person who is with him, that please will you sit down and look and admire the picture that is there on the wall. And at the same time, again he reminds, "I said Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance." And he says, well, probably he also does not like the fact that the picture is painted for the others to take a look at the beauty of my wife, or that others should show any admiration towards that particular lady. For he says, Fra Pandolf painted not this countenance, that is the countenance is the face of that lady, the face of my wife, and the face of the Duchess. He did not paint for the others to look upon and admire. He even feels jealous of the fact that the others should look upon that portrait and show their sense of admiration. For he says he never designed and he never painted that strangers like you, that is, you are a stranger, you are not familiar with that portrait, and neither you are familiar with the lady, with my Duchess, and with my wife. And he never painted this picture for that particular face for the admiration of you all, and especially you strangers. But the depth and the passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turn. And he says that earnest glance, that humility, that beauty that is there, portrayed on the wall and portrayed on the picture, that was simply meant for me. That is, that beauty was, that eternal beauty, you can say, or the earnest glance, that sincerity, that look of sincerity that is there in the picture, that was meant for me only. So even what is there on the wall, painted as a picture, and the glance that is there in that particular portrait, he is trying to tell the listener that it was meant only for me, that only I can admire that earnest glance on the face, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I. And see how haughtily, with what arrogance he says that, see, I am giving you the pleasure by drawing the curtain so that you can have a look at the portrait. But nobody, I do not give this pleasure to anybody. This is my privilege. It is for me only to decide that who should look upon that portrait and for whom should I put the curtain aside so that you can take a glance or take a look at that particular picture. So it says that you should feel happy that the curtain I have drawn for you, he says, and seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how much such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not a husband's presence only, called that spot of joy in the Duchess' cheek. And he says that if I put aside the curtain, even people would dare to ask me, you are not the one, the first one who is going to ask me. But others also tend to ask this question, that how come and how was Fra Pandol able to put that spot of blush on the face of the lady? How came that glance, that blush, that red cheek that is there painted on the wall, he says, and you are not, and he's telling him that, see, you are not the first one who's going to ask the same question, that how come she had that spot of redness on her cheek. So, and then at the same time, question me, sir, 'twas not a husband's presence only, called that spot of joy in the Duchess' cheek. And you can even question. I mean, so he's presuming that this man, this listener can also question that besides a husband, can she give this blush, or can she show this blush on her face by looking at others also? Or the husband only seems to have the privilege of watching the wives blushing. So perhaps Fra Pandor chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half blush that dies along her throat. And he, is very angry and irritated at the audacity of Fra Pandolf. He says, how can that man or that painter dare to remove her mantle from her wrist? That is, how can he dare to remove that little mantle that is lying overlapping her wrist? So, and he says that her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, that he was feeling that she should put away that mantle a little bit so that he will be able to paint the hand very nicely, or the faint half flush that dies along her throat, or that blush, that half flush is that blush, that redness that is there on her throat. So he wants to go deep inside the figure to paint or give a liveliness to the portrait, or give a liveliness to the sensitivity or the feelings of the woman, of the Duchess, in that particular portrait. And the husband, of course, does not like the idea that the painter should be so audacious enough, bold enough to do this. Such stuff was courtesy, he says, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. But he is showing his anger also, because he feels that when the painter asked her to remove the mantle a little bit, she thought that this was just an act of courtesy. That is just a little demand, and she does not mind in doing so. So, such stuff was courtesy, she thought. That is the wife, the Duchess thought, and cause enough, and just, I mean, pleasing the painter and removing that mantle from her wrist for a little bit. Yeah, she is having or putting that faint blush getting that faint blush along her throat. And she does not mind it at all, because that could be a cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart. And now, see, he is summing up the character of Lady Duchess. For he is telling her, he is reminding this courtier that what my lady was like. What was the character of the Duchess? She said she had a heart. How shall I say that? How should I describe her? He says, too soon made glad and too easily impressed. That is, my lady, she had a heart. I mean, she was so humble and so all the time, having feelings alike for each and every individual. That is, she was impressed easily by whatever anybody said to her. It may be a servant, it may be a gardener, it may be a farmer, it may be a visitor, it may be the husband's friend, it may, in fact, be the husband himself. But she was happy at the remarks of anybody, whosoever made a remark to her, and she was easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. That is, she had an admiration for nature, for her surroundings, for the incidents, for the people, everybody. She had a liking, and her looks went everywhere. That is, her looks were not only confined towards her husband, that means giving soft looks, sensitive looks towards her husband only, but that type of a look went everywhere. She was able to please everybody, and she admired everything that is there around her. And whatever she confronts with, she liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one, but says this is not one thing, my favor. And another very important thing which he's trying to point out to the courtier is that it was not all one. That is, her looks was not the one thing that I objected to, but my favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech. That is, if I gave her an expensive gift, if an and she would wear it along her breast, that, or whether if she is watching the sunset by the west, or if she is plucking, somebody picked up a bunch of cherries and offered it to her, or even if she is riding a white mule, everything she would put it on the same line. That is, she would treat with the similar attention and give the similar admiration. I mean, she never demarcated that this is a gift from my man, from my husband, a rich and a wealthy class of society to which he belongs. And so it is different. I mean, it has a different sensitivity and a different feeling, and she should feel obliged and show her gratitude towards that particular gift which has been given to her by the husband, rather than the bunch of cherries which is probably the gardener has given to her, or whether she should show her happiness while she's riding a white mule or just watching the sunset. So everything, all would draw, every action, every such action, whether it is my gift or anybody else's gift, it will all draw from her like the approving speech. That is, she would applaud, she would show her approval, she would show her appreciation, her gladness. He says, or blush at least. That is, if she does not utter a word of approval or a applause or a liking, but at least by a smile or a blush on her face would indicate that she is pleased by everybody's gift and everybody's attention. She thanked men. Good. But thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. That is, well, this is courtesy. It is on moral grounds. If anybody offers you anything, thanking is one of the natural and the mutual thing, act of reciprocation that you should do. And she says, all right, she thanked men. But then she thanked everybody. And she did not know the difference of what I am giving to her. That is my gift of a 900 years old name that is from the ancestral time to the present day. That is, I belong to that bourgeoisie class of society, to that Aristotle class of society, and she is married to the superior class. So she should not rate my gift with anybody's gift on a similar ground, on the same ground. He says that if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift, that is, if anybody would come and offer a little thing to her, she would thank that person with that same respect, with the same gratitude as she would thank me. So there is absolutely no difference. Who would stoop to blame this sort of trifling? And he says, and in this sentence, he's showing his disagreement, his anger at this attitude of his Duchess. He says, well, I would not come down from my status and from my position to tell her this, that I do not approve of your behavior. This is not to my liking. This is beyond my status. That I should stoop down, come down, and state my dislike for such triflings, that is, these little things, what she is doing. Show my disfavor to her for these little things. I cannot stoop down, that is, I cannot come down from my position, from my status, and tell her, remind her that this is what I do not approve of. Even had you the skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that, and you discuss me, here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set, he says, her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Now, see how clearly he makes a statement. He says, to make your will quite clear to such a one. That is, naturally, there should be a compatibility between the husband and the wife. They should be able to communicate with each other and discuss with each other their likings and their dislikings, as well as their favors or their disfavors. But he says, well, it is quite clear to me, to such an one, that I should not come down and tell her, just tell her that, see, this is what you have done and it disgusts me. And here you have done too much for the others. You have exceeded the mark, overdone. You, in your particular status as a duchess, you should not be doing this. And even if she is half listened, even if she listens to me for a little bit only, nor plainly set her wits to yours, or if she agrees to match her wits, her intelligence with my own wits, he says, forsooth, or rather would make an excuse that why she acted in this manner, or why she behaved in this manner, even then I would dare to stoop. But let me tell you, he says, let me tell you, I never dare to stoop. See, he is a man. He's very arrogant, very haughty, very ruthless. And he says, well, I will not dare to come down. Why should I? That is that male ego, that male chauvinism that stops him from stooping and making his wife realize what he likes and what he dislikes. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile? And he says, well, I do not disagree to the fact that whenever I passed and whenever I went along with her, or whenever I passed her, she always gave me, she smiled at me. She gave a pleasant smile to me. But then who passed without that particular smile? She not only smiled on me, but she smiled at everybody. And then I gave commands, and all smiles stopped. Now, see how in this small sentence he says, this grew, I gave commands. That is, I did not like. I did not like that idea that she should be smiling on everybody. She should be showing her pleasure, her willingness for everybody. This grew, and therefore I gave commands. That is, it is my right to express my behavior, my likes towards her. I gave commands, and then all smiles stopped together. That is, this is the statement which shows that he got her killed. Either he killed her or he got her killed, whatever it is. And there she stands and that is why her picture is there. That is, she is there alive, painted on the wall. That is, she is not alive here to stand by my side, but she is alive there, painted on the wall. And now, I mean, with this portrayal of the character of the Duchess, the Duke is making it very explicit to that courtier that, see, this is what I like and this is what I do not like. This is what I will tolerate in my wife, and this is what I will not tolerate in my wife. And if the second marriage, if the woman does not want to meet the same ends like my first wife, she should be cautious and careful. So now he asks the listener, will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below. Then he says that come down. He offers him to come downstairs so that he can be there with the other companions. I repeat, and then while he's going downstairs with that listener, with the courtier, he says, the count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed. And he says, well, I know your count is very wealthy, and his known superfluous wealth is something which I will not disallow. Of course, I will accept dowry. Of course, I will accept that wealth. That is there. So he is showing his greed. He's showing his pride. He's showing his greed at the same time. Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. And at the same time, very meekly, he says, well, see, of course, my object is the daughter, is his daughter, the countess' daughter. Of course, my object is to marry the daughter of the count. But you see, whatever superfluous wealth or whatever dowry he offers, I am ready to. It will not be disallowed. I will accept it. Nay, we'll go together down. Sir, notice Neptune, though taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which claws of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Now see, in the last sentence, he is showing that the Duke is showing that how dementing and controlling he is. And he's showing off to the courtier, to the servant of the count, that see, while going down, notice Neptune taming the seahorse, and this picture of a Neptune taming a seahorse. Neptune is supposed to be the sea god. And he says this was cast in bronze, that is painted in this sculpted, this figure was cast in bronze by the claws of Innsbruck. But the sea god, he's reminding the courtier that I am the sea god. That is, I am the controller. I am the ruler. I am the dominant person out here. And if you see the sea god taming the horse is supposed to be my wife. So she should stand within her limitations. So let me tell you, dear children, that during the Victorian age, the wives, were supposed to be very docile, very humble, very sensitive, and all the time showing their having a feeling of self-sacrifice. They were supposed to do that. And Victorian husbands, of course, were supposed to be the pure virginal. The brides were supposed to be pure virginal brides, but the husbands were supposed to be very arrogant, very ruthless, very dominating, and they wanted to, and rather they allowed their wives to act according to their own will. Whatever they desired, they wanted their wives to act according to their own wills. So the Duke is showing this Neptune taming a seahorse as if this is one of his artistic acquisitions. And this artistic acquisition is also something which is he wants to be present in his second wife. That is, this presence of the second wife or the marriage with the second wife is also going to be an acquisition for him, and she should act as he desires her to act. So, how you can, in a way, the picture of the Victorian age in this particular respect of a man-woman relationship or the husband-wife relationship, you can also compare with the Indian scene also, where in the beginning the husbands were very dominating, and the women were just, they relegated to the background, and they were the women who used to, I mean, do act according to that. They had no say in the financial matters. The women never had any say in the financial matters of the house, and they were only allowed to do the cooking and look after the welfare of their husband, and they never had a say in their life, and they were very meek, docile, and quiet, and the husbands were always very dominating. But of course, things have changed with centuries, things have changed with science, with the coming of science and with technology in life. And therefore, this is very, very important. That picture of the Victorian age, but was very much similar, a little similar to the Indian scene also. And there are three literary devices that are used in this particular poem: alliteration, caesura, and enjambment. And alliteration is when you are using the same consonant sound in the sentence, and caesura is the pause, as you know, which occurs in the middle of the sentence, like in the sentence, somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked. So the pause in between is the caesura, and enjambment, of course, is the breaking of the lines, the transitions that you can see in between the lines 2 and 3 and the lines 5 and 6. So this whole poem is written in one stanza, and the meter that is used is the iambic pentameter, that is five stressed and five unstressed syllables that are used in this particular poem. So I hope you've understood. Thank you so much.